All right, so I'm here with my friend Tracy Hoffer, one of my favorite gospel
Hello
thinkers here
there.
at the church, and I don't know, we've had lots of conversations over the years, and I think feel like we're becoming more and more clear on how we understand God, how we understand the gospel, how we understand human nature,
Yeah.
and here we are in 2020, find ourselves in a really weird time, right? And
I
it's
think
kind
that's
of
an understatement.
understatement of the century. No kidding. I mean,
Like freaky time might be
yeah,
more
it's
accurate.
scary. It's
It
crazy.
is scary.
My brother Brad, I don't know if you've seen it on Facebook or anything, but he's got this shirt that he had made that just says
Yeah.
2019. And
Yeah.
it's like, it
Oh,
goes
to
without
go back.
saying. It turns out 2019 was a phenomenal year. It's a great year. Way
And you
better
know what's
than
sad? We didn't
we
appreciate
didn't
it.
appreciate it. We didn't realize how good
No.
we had it. That's right.
Gosh.
That's right. So here we
That's kind of
are.
the good that's kind of the
Good.
good lesson though out of this, I think, is even right now, like appreciate, even though this feels freaky,
Yeah.
any little thing we can appreciate it because we don't know what else is coming. It's kind of
Yeah.
like when you're sick and you don't appreciate when you're healthy,
Yeah.
like
That's absolutely
there,
right.
yeah,
We just
yeah,
don't know how good we have it so often. And
no,
so just to reflect on, okay, I've got my basic needs are met,
yeah,
and even well beyond that. Here we got plenty of
yes,
food. We've got
yeah,
all sorts
yeah,
of forms of entertainment, and then even things are opening up. And you're right.
yeah,
God only knows what's going to happen in the next couple days, weeks, months. And so
yeah,
very true, very true.
yeah.
It's good to just sort of reflect and just be thankful for the
But that doesn't mean we can't say it's still crazy times out
yeah.
there.
Right.
Yes,
Right.
yeah,
It definitely is.
yeah,
And in our
yeah,
lifetime, I mean, you look at just the history of the world, there's always been trouble and plagues and war
right,
and lots of hard things. It's part of life in this world.
yeah,
But man, it just for us in our little phase of life that or a
mhm,
little part of history we found ourselves in is like this unprecedented
right,
strange time. So anyway,
yeah,
that's where we're at, and I just want to talk with you. We've had lots of good conversations about even politics recently, and I thought it's good, maybe good to record a conversation for the encouragement of other people
yeah,
regarding how we're thinking through these things, how we are making sense of the charged, divisive climate we're living in politically. And of
yeah,
course, we're coming up on the election in November, and man, it is just like at a heightened sense of I don't know, it's at like a fever pitch right now
right, right,
for all of us, probably individually, and then culturally in our country. And so, one of the things I want to touch on, which I think is going to be an interesting conversation, because it may even go directions that are unique even for the conversations we've had in the past, but like
okay,
how the gospel relates to our politics.
mm,
For some, it seems like, I mean, I've got tons of believing friends, and
mhm,
for some, I see their understanding of gospel or their faith leading them to a hard right wing position,
mhm,
really like radical right. And for
mhm,
others, I see the opposite. I see their faith leading them toward a staunch left wing position,
yeah,
more progressive position.
yeah,
And again, all believers in the same gospel, I guess fundamentally in the same gospel, but these drastic differences. And one of the things that I want us to talk about is, okay, how does the gospel inform us when it comes to this part of our lives? It's a really important part of our lives.
yeah,
Does it lead us one way or the other?
mm,
And how, is it even related in the ways that we kind of try to make it related? And this is
assume
something
it to be,
and assume it
yeah,
to be related.
yeah,
And as
yeah,
we've been talking about, just for context for anyone listening, like we've talked about this idea of, hey, there's the spiritual kingdom and the
mhm,
gospel realities regarding our relationship with God and what's coming in the future. And that is one thing. That's one dimension. And then there's just the natural world that we find ourselves living in that
yeah,
operates quite differently from the spiritual kingdom that we believe in, that we believe
yes,
we need in terms of God and the
yes,
gospel and the hope for the future and the redemption of all things and
yeah,
the restoration of the world. I mean, all that gives us great hope. But what does it do? What's it do in the here and now? And does it make us
right,
just a right or a left person, or does it inform us at all, or maybe not as much as we maybe not as much as we tend to think. So
Right.
I'd like to go there. So anything that I've said so far, do you want to just jump on any of those
Gosh.
thoughts or not quite yet?
Well, you know me, I always have lots to say. So, kind of thinking along those lines, uh, oh my goodness. I think where I want to start in is just the very fact that we know of believers who have different ideas from our own person. And one of the things that I'm saddened to see on social media is one side or the other will say, how can a believer support this person or
Yeah.
this cause?
Yep. You've
So
seen that
right
both
there,
directions,
that
right?
tells me, yes,
Me too.
exactly,
Yep.
both directions. But my
Yep.
point is that um, what I kind of would like to show or talk about is how what the truth of the gospel is. So I'm going to kind of start there to wherever we go down these different rabbit trails.
Mhm.
So realizing that we are like Genesis 1, we're made of dust. We are but dust. And God said, you need a helper. And when Jesus came and said, I need to leave so that the helper can come to you. So what I'm doing here on a real quick nutshell is to say we're of dust, and salvation is when God gives us his spirit. We become, as we say, we have the down payment. We have the
The pledge
inheritance
of our
of
inheritance.
the pledge of the holy, yes,
Yep.
pledge of inheritance. And so, as you just mentioned, on this earth, um, there has not yet been full redemption. Full restoration is a word that you used, and we see from Genesis to Revelation, at the end, the new heavens and the new earth, when it will all fully be restored. So right now, everything is living in the in between stage, if you will. And so we as believers, even, we do not yet have our resurrected bodies as Christ did. We are still made of dust. We're just natural man with the Spirit of God dwelling in us. And so for that reason, while we're like, but we should be unified. From God's perspective, we are unified in that all believers have his spirit dwelling in them, which has opened then each believer's eyes to go, we have a good God who loves me. And as Paul then says in Romans 7, but we're still living in that. I see his goodness. I see his character. I even can kind of get a glimpse of how in his kingdom we'll all be harmonious.
Yeah.
But even us as believers can't yet fully act out on that. Because there's the battle of the mind, as he said at the end of 7. There is a war even raging in me with the Spirit of God in my mind, and then the spirit of, or the law of sin. I'm sorry, the law of I'm blanking out right
It's
now.
okay.
But there's the law of sin and death waging against the law of my mind that says I joyfully concur with God. So even in myself, there's still a battle of I can't always do the right thing that I even can agree with is the right thing. And then I think of in later on in Romans, in 13 or one of those chapters, 13 or 14, but when he talks about one, God has established the government.
Yeah.
And
Romans
then
13.
two, yeah. And then two, even amongst each other, we have brothers who don't believe the same way we do. And he talks about if it's right in that person's mind or wrong, then it's a sin and we have to let them be. And specifically, I know the context was to not eat meat. And I thought that was fascinating that he's not rallying up those of us who know the right thing to do and pummel it into that guy's head. And so back to the politics, it's giving me some measure of grace to go, we're all grappling here. All of these political issues have nuances. They're not completely obviously black and white. There's nuances. Having said that,
so important. Yep.
One more thing, and then I'll stop talking for a second. But having said that, because I'm now being awakened to paying more attention to politics. I just stuck my head in the sand, and I was like, I don't like it when the right says our person is a godly man, and and
Mhm.
looks down on the left. I wanted nothing to do with that.
Mhm.
But I am being aware of, as a human being living in this country, are our rights being taken away? So
Right. And
that's
policy
personally
matters.
where I want to, yes, yes, and I want to be aware. So I'm kind of showing, in my mind, I see a distinction between the already not yet. So
Mhm.
I can't view everything from a spiritual perspective and say spiritually it's appropriate to do this choice or that choice.
Mhm.
And yet practically we all need to make decisions and do the best that we can. So even as believers, we're going to be on opposite sides. And while that's sad and even at times heartbreaking, especially in this particular culture, it kind of just is.
Yep.
That's kind of my thought.
Yep. And inserting gospel language into it. And while that
Yeah.
is true and that is our greatest hope, it isn't just going to fix it. It isn't just going to make
No.
all Christians agree or,
No.
usher in some period of amazing peace for our country, probably.
No.
Even though, um, as I don't know, man, even my social media presence, I don't do a lot with it, but once in a while I
Mm-hmm.
share things and I feel compelled sometimes to share the gospel just in that, like, can the crap we're going through in this world awaken us to the value of God? Can it help us see at least that we need God? Again, not that that means this is all going to just be solvable by saying we affirm the same truths,
Yeah.
but I don't know, just somehow to me, it comforts me to know who God is and that his kingdom is different and that he is sovereign. He is in control of what happens here. And there is, I'm studying Ephesians 4 right now for the sermon
Yeah.
series, and it talks about the day of redemption. We've been sealed by the Spirit
Yeah.
for the day of redemption, the day of release, when we're all freed from the bondage of cursed
Yes.
fallen minds and fallen bodies in a fallen world.
Yes.
That day is coming. That
Yeah.
grounds us. It gives us hope. And in the meantime, we stumble along, we struggle through these things. And like you said, we have different opinions as to what is a better policy, right? There are
Right.
differences. And I have strong opinions, and you, I'm sure, have strong
Yeah.
opinions too.
Yeah.
And I can quickly jump on one side. I mean, so many times, especially since COVID hit, I've just found myself being really strong and really, frankly, angry about things because of
Mm-hmm.
my more I called myself more libertarian. If I was
Mm-hmm.
forced in a political
Mm-hmm.
context and using political terminology, I would say I'm probably more of a libertarian, but like a right-leaning libertarian.
Yeah.
um, and I think that's a good way to categorize myself. But I found myself leaning more toward the right, and then I can just get the tunnel vision that becomes so inflammatory. And I mean, I understand why people are angry. I can sympathize with. I feel it. I get angry,
Mm-hmm.
um, but at the same time, there's another part of me that says, "Gosh, this inability to think in a balanced way, to appreciate that there are some legitimate points being made on both sides." And
Mm-hmm.
um, I guess I would just say again, I can sympathize with those who say no, there isn't, like this whole BLM versus kind of the police and that whole
Right.
discussion. Like
Right.
I understand why people can say no, it's pretty black and white. I mean, in some
Right.
ways, yes, but in some ways,
Yeah.
no. And
Yeah.
I have to
Yeah.
explain more of what I mean.
Yeah.
It would take a lot more words to explain what I mean by that. But I guess what I'm getting at for now is I think what you and I, maybe in partly the way we're wired and in our understanding of just human nature being what it is, I think both of us appreciate balance and appreciate
Mm-hmm.
nuance and see
Yeah.
the need for it, and think even from a temporal standpoint, hey, people could benefit from perhaps a little more nuanced conversation that can see things a little bit more gray and go and maybe dialogue back and forth. And that can be a helpful, appropriate thing.
It could. I do think right now, though, that's one of the unfortunate things is,
Mhm.
in all reality, dialogue isn't really encouraged or
Yeah,
allowed.
right.
And so to even say, oh, I'm going to be, because I've kind of always seen myself as being center.
Hmm.
And again, even before I couldn't tell you why. And so now I have been reading up lots and lots and lots ever
Hmm.
since COVID and everything else. So, but um, so back to the point about even the gospel. um, the only way that we can be informed, that's not, that sounds too strong. The strongest point of the gospel is that God loves us. God is pursuing each one of these people that we're witnessing, experiencing, that I am a part, I mean, me in this culture that we're living in, God is, even though it looks like utter pandemonium. And when you read the verse on Sunday during the sermon, or maybe it was Sunday school, but in Romans 3, where there is none righteous, not one. And he's saying, and that's the general state of man left to himself, natural man, swift to shed blood, poison of asp on their tongue. So that is natural man, and yet God, either you, whether you want to call it common grace or in the believer with his spirit, he is acting in amongst all of this and through that. Like, one of the things that I keep thinking of, and this may sound so weird, because I personally get really angry at the injustice of the lies.
Mm-hmm.
So the willingness to, so with the rioters, when they
Mm-hmm.
say, oh, the police brought it on, and we'll even bring cameras in to make it look like, to show what the police are doing, but not to show what they themselves are doing. Or then when the leaders say, yep, this is mostly peaceful protests, and I'm thinking, no, it's not. You guys are lying. And I get really, that's where I
Yeah.
get
Yeah.
worked up and angry. So,
Yeah.
but what blows my mind, and this doesn't change what I'm necessarily, how I'm going to vote or what my opinions are, but the gospel says God is pursuing each one of those characters
Mm-hmm.
just as much as he's pursuing me. And I have no idea that he is not in the process of opening that person's eye. Think of the guy who was brutally hitting the policeman over the head with the bat.
Yeah.
God is pursuing him. God so loved the world that he gave his son.
Mm-hmm.
And to think about that, our God, the God of the universe, is completely different than all of us, whether it's the person hitting the policeman over the head, or me sitting here in judgment of me deciding what I think happened in that scenario, and I think I see it clearly, or the person getting beaten over the head. God looks at us very differently. He has pure vision and clear thinking. And back to my point even earlier, even though we're a believer and we have the Spirit, my thinking still isn't clear. I still
Yep.
can't judge
Filled with
appropriately.
biases
Yes,
and blinders. Absolutely.
yes,
And,
yes.
and I think part of what our faith helps us to do is to accept that and
Accept it.
to agree with God
Exactly.
that that's true. And there's some
Yes.
relief in that, because when I start, my own sense of sovereignty and judgment starts rising up within me, which is frequent and
Yeah.
it happens
Yeah.
easily. Um, Man, the burden of that, again, the way even it feels, the anger, I mean, it's
Yeah.
not healthy, and in the moment
Mm-mm.
you're just there, it's just where you're at. But at some point you reflect and like, gosh, that was not healthy, but it's so easy to get there because of this natural tendency
You're
to,
right.
again, sit in judgment, to sit over, to
Right.
trust in our
Right.
own thinking and to trust in our own assessment. And so I think it's great that part of what the gospel tells us is that we are not trustworthy, and there is one who is, and he sees it clearly. And along with that, you were sort of alluding to this, but along with that, he has compassion for us and the other
Yeah.
people who are filled with
Yeah.
anger and filled with fear. I mean, that's one of the things I
Yeah.
think about, Tracy, when it comes to the whole, you get the right wing and the left wing. And for us, it's probably easier to understand some of the points, even from a policy perspective, of the right wing. Although
Right.
at times I can see where people on
Yeah.
the left are coming from.
Yeah.
But here's one common denominator for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's scared. Everybody is
Yes.
scared of where this is going. Everybody's
Yeah.
scared.
Yeah.
Everybody feels a sense of wanting to protect themselves, protect
Yeah.
their loved ones, protect the people they consider victims or the
Yeah.
oppressed. Everyone is concerned with those things, and part of where the anger comes from is that place of fear, and
Yeah.
the what again both sides consider like this existential threat. Like, like the right considers the election of Biden an existential threat, and the left considers the election of Trump would be an existential threat. And
Right.
in some way, I mean, again, that's human and it's understandable. And so we end up in this place of, again, being enslaved to our fear and controlled. And so now to think of, okay, so he's overall, and he's in pursuit of us, and he loves us. And as we gave the example a few weeks ago with Cain, the first murderer in the Bible, the first, whether you want to call it the first one who just committed, like the police brutality, who was unwarranted in the excessive deadly force, or you want to associate him with the rioter who turns into a murderer in that context. He's the first human being who engaged in that whose anger controlled him to such a degree, took someone else's life. And you see the way God approaches him, and it is this gracious approach of, where are you? Why is your countenance falling? It's like God inviting him, hey, I'm here for you. And all that you're suffering with inside, God's like, I see that, and I have compassion. And then again, from a gospel perspective, fast forward, you have the coming of Christ, who is the embodiment of compassion and mercy for suffering sinners, and then lays his life down for us to be redeemed. And that, again, it's not going to fix our political world. We're not under any delusion that somehow, like you said, that some politician is going to be this godly person. I don't see that happening on either side.
No.
But
I don't think it was ever intended to be that way. And this is going to sound like a really weird connection to make, but I'm going to start. So at the end of Romans 1, when it says, even though they know the ordinance of God, that those who practice such things are worthy of death, they not only do them, but they give hearty approval to those also who do. So the word hearty approval, and you know how I geek out on Greek words, but it's the compound word that's together with. And it's having pleasure, or what was the other phrase? To think well of, together with. And so human beings by nature, and the connection I'm going to make is, even at the Tower of Babel, man rose together. And when man is fully united together, it's against God. And so I do believe, so like I said a moment ago, even as believers, we are united. We are the church. We're not actually necessarily going to experience that the way we would like to. So I'm even going at like how the rioters are united together. The left is united together. The right is united together. Certain big churches that are refusing the government are uniting together. Hearty approval with, giving. And I feel like God is he is allowing that on the earth. But as you were saying earlier, maybe in one of our text messages, talking about the kingdom that's going to come, we will never experience this division and this animosity and this scratching our head going, how should we do this? How should we behave? And like you said, I won't be fearful and then act out in murder because I'm either afraid or I'm mad that things didn't go my way. We will truly live in a united spirit in God's kingdom. And I just feel like, back to your point about there not being a quote unquote godly leader, I just don't believe God has purposed this in between with the overlapping that we always do, the old man, the new man, the earth and the heaven. It's never meant to be fully united together, because right now, until we're in our resurrected bodies and in the new heaven and the new earth, there's still against in us.
Right.
So I just think that's something to think about. Yeah,
I agree. And I want to say, for anyone who happens to listen to this, because I don't know who might listen to it, but
true.
I don't know. Again, I'm thinking of maybe if someone's just kind of on the fence, or they believe in Christianity, but or they don't, or they're just considering it, and okay, I'm open to hearing it, but I don't know if I buy it. I mean, from that type of vantage point, for that person, I can understand. Well, even that it sounds weird. Pie in the sky. Okay, there's this future coming that's going to be perfect. There's going to be harmony. There's going to be God and man living in, again, this loving, right, finally, like utopia, right? Because a lot of what's happening and a lot of what fuels the conflict today, ironically, is like people are
Yes.
fighting for utopia. Even the way we've handled this, I don't want to go down this rabbit trail, but even the way we've handled this pandemic, it's like we're, if this is a thing or a term, which I'm maybe just making up the idea in my head right now, but it's like we're trying to strive toward a biological utopia, like we can eradicate all
Yeah.
disease. And some of what intensifies the debate is people are fighting so hard to try to do the impossible, to do that which
Yes.
will never happen in this
Yeah.
world. We
Yeah.
won't, it's not going to happen, at
No.
least on this side.
No.
So again, but from a faith perspective, I guess it does highlight for me the fact that I look around and I know that there's not going to be the perfect man. I know there's
Mm-hmm.
not going to be a perfect resolution to the pandemic. There's not going to
Mm-hmm.
be a perfect resolution to these political problems. That does help me appreciate, and that's not what persuaded us. Ultimately, it's God and His Spirit that helps us to see who He is and what He's like,
Yeah.
and His mercy and His grace poured out through
Yeah.
Christ. But there are things in this world that can help us see, wow, the need for that to be true.
Yes.
And
Okay. Yes. So that's my other point then is blessed are the feet of him who brings good news. And then what was the verse you did on Sunday with the sermon of the wholesome word? So Paul
yeah,
talks about don't let an unwholesome
yeah,
word, and you did this awesome job. Plug in for a sermon last week. If you haven't listened to it, you need to listen to it. But the wholesome word is we get to share Christ. And that sounds like a cliche,
yeah.
but again, the gospel is God is for us. And he
Mhm.
proved that visibly in the person of Jesus. He came in a body and experienced life like we did to show how much he empathizes
Mhm.
with, and that's the big, buzzword right now is empathy.
Yeah, it is.
God truly empathizes. He, as Jesus, or Paul says about Jesus in Philippians, he did not count it robbery to let go of his godness, and he came down and lived as a man. So God came in the flesh, in the person of Christ, to live amongst us, to show us he is for us, even to the point of dying for us.
Yep.
So this good God, so even though all hell is breaking loose, blessed are the feet. We get to share with whoever wants to hear it. And it's good news is even though it looks awful and we're literally killing each other.
Yeah.
And by the way, that ferocity that we're seeing was on display towards Christ himself
That's right.
in his flesh.
That's
And
right.
God allowed that. The
Yep.
God of the universe, who holds us together by the power of his word, allowed his own creatures to brutalize him.
Yep.
And just like what we're seeing.
And would
So the good
allow, and
news
just to
is,
put it, just to personalize it,
yeah,
would allow you and allow me to treat him that way and in love to
yes,
absorb it.
yes,
Just
and did
takes it.
not respond
Yep.
the
With
way we
evil
would.
with evil. He did not respond to
Yes,
evil with evil.
no,
He responds to
no,
evil with good.
yes.
And to us,
And
that
so
blows us
that's
away.
what's that?
And that blows us away. That's part of what,
Yes,
yeah, keep going.
the gratitude. Well, I was just going to say that's what we get to share, not
Mhm.
change your thinking about this thought or, this political
Mhm.
side, I mean, because none of us has clear vision. I have my strong opinion, but despite what's going on down here, the good news that I can share with you, that we can share with each other,
Mhm.
is God is loving and will fully bring this. And maybe it's because I'm wired looking forward to the future. I love things so
Mhm.
that gives me, that's what it helps me to deal with. I mean, frankly, it's really depressing where we're at right now, but to
Yeah,
know
it
it
is.
will get better and forever, not just to momentarily get better. So anyway, all that to
Yep.
say, we are ambassadors of reconciliation, and it's not clean up your act and stop thinking that way and quit believing in that politician. It's despite what you're thinking about the things down here, God loves you, and has forgiven you, and there's now no condemnation to those in Christ.
Okay, so let's wander into some, I don't know, challenging territory here. All right. So,
Okay.
because, and even
Yep.
I'm just thinking out loud. So
Okay.
this is off the cuff, but can that perspective for in your thinking, because I have my opinion on this, which is
Okay.
still developing even as I'm saying this, but can that perspective, can that understanding of, hey, this is who God is, this is what God's heart is for you, can that affect the way you engage in, whether it's just your political thinking, your political conversation or debate with another person? Can it affect that in your mind? Can that understanding of God affect how we think, even about whether it's, again, policies or how we engage someone in a discussion about those things? I mean, do you think it can bear fruit in that arena, or are you skeptical that maybe it won't?
I don't know if I'm skeptical as much as leery. My tendency has always been, and it's becoming less so, is I need to get you to agree with me, because
Right.
if you agree with me, then I feel validated.
Right.
And it's a lot of energy to do that. And at my age, I'm
Just too dang
so
tired.
tired.
Yeah.
Like I had a conversation with a couple a few weeks back, and I was saying, I think, so I won't even get into the details, but I basically think once the election is over,
Hmm.
that this whole COVID thing will be a non-topic. And they started to, fight back, and
Hmm.
and all of a sudden I thought, and I said to them, you know what? I don't even have to argue, because I'll either
Yeah. It'll be right. You'll
be
be
right
right or
or
you'll be
wrong.
wrong.
Right. And
Right.
so I don't really have
I
to
hope you're
even,
right.
I'm just giving you my opinion. I mean,
Yeah.
so my point is, us as believers, it is not our job to persuade. For one, how do I know even what I'm thinking is fully accurate or fully on track? And to me, I guess what I'm saying, I'm going to answer this coming at it from another way. The Spirit of God will accomplish His
Yeah.
word,
Yeah.
and He will
Yeah.
open the eyes of those who he is going to open. So I either get to be a part of that, and I never even knew it, and that's awesome, but it isn't because I set out to
I
do it.
set out to on a
Yeah.
crusade. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. I
And
just
yeah.
no. So to me, does it help inform me to maybe not be so vicious to somebody? Maybe. And I still may in a moment just get so stinking mad that I am snotty as all get out, and I lay them open, and then I've left them, raw and bleeding, and
Right.
I feel bad afterwards. So
Right.
I just am careful about, we got to use the gospel to correct how we're behaving, and then kind of force everything. I have no idea. I just think God is going to
Yeah.
do
I
what He
really like
does.
that. I really like
Yeah,
that. I think
yeah,
I really like that. And yeah, what I was thinking in my mind was, it, for one, when there are moments of, and there are plenty of moments in which I'm not seeing the truth of that as valuable, or
right.
I'm not compelled by it. I'm just sucked into whatever the current circumstances are, or whatever I'm seeing on the news or whatever. There's
Yeah,
plenty of moments where I'm just stuck. Uh,
yeah, yeah,
but when there are glimmers of that truth, there is some relief, and there can be some rest.
yeah.
And I don't know. For me, it's helped me to. I'll say this: it's helped me to appreciate when I hear a balanced conversation. As you said earlier, there's not much of that. There's not much healthy
Mm-mm,
dialogue at all. I mean, if you're
mm-mm.
looking for it, you're not going to find much of it. But
Yeah,
there have been places, podcasts I've listened to, other
yeah,
things, people that you and I listen to,
yeah,
the Joe Rogans of the world, or Jordan Petersons of the
yeah,
world, or
yeah,
some of the intellectual dark web people, Brett Weinstein, people who are on different sides of things, but can seem to
yes,
have even, was it Peter Yang? I think his first name is Peter, right? Yang had a podcast discussion with Ben Shapiro recently. And I was like, these guys disagree tenaciously, but they're able to do so charitably. It's
respectfully.
respectfully. It was super.
Yes,
I think
yes,
that's really great.
yeah,
And I think more
yeah,
people, if they could even be exposed to that, might say, "Oh, wow, this is actually a helpful, balanced conversation." Um, so anyway, yeah, I was curious what you'd say about that, but I do
yeah.
think that it can help to appreciate balance some, and even though it's only a matter of time before um, we're always going to bump into differences. That's just part of
Yeah,
human nature and
yeah,
living in this fallen world. In fact, when you were saying it earlier, maybe just revisit this idea. But you're talking about, you got the right and the left, and I saw a video the other day of a bunch of Trump supporters clashing with some BLM or Antifa people, and they were literally just screaming at each other. And it's a miracle it didn't turn into a massacre. There's, screaming at each other, and in that moment, those sides are unified, and what they're unified primarily around is their mutual agreed upon hatred of the other side. Right. Going both directions. But the irony is, and what you and I know to be true, if any two members of the Trump group or the Antifa group went home and lived together for any period of time, they're going to start to collide over other stuff. They may agree on their views politically, but human nature is such that we are just at war. We're all fighting for survival, and we all have things we believe we need, and values we want to strive for or protect. And that is the way of the world. And so again,
it is the system of the world that God has allowed to be. And I think you're right. And so there's actually, I don't know if you saw it. I think I saw it this morning, over the night. I'm not sure which city. Now there's all this stuff going on in about 5 cities.
Right.
But there was literally a car that had a BLM or Antifa flag on it, and their own people
destroyed it,
whipped him out and started beating on him. So to me, I guess it just shows that this only God and only God's Spirit is love, is true peace, because human beings can't even agree on what
they agree upon.
Yes.
Or
yes. Yeah. I mean, I think that, to see their wrath, and I know we've talked about this before, but doing the Roman study, we did a survey of the word wrath throughout the New Testament, because we always attribute it to God's wrath. And it's really interesting how in the Greek, there's actually only a couple times, and even that, it was kind of iffy in my mind, of it being attributed to God. But the majority of time, it's man's wrath towards God, and then man's wrath towards each other. And we're living in a time where it is really being exposed very clearly, just how we are, to the point where we will kill each other. I mean, it's like Civil War time. And it sounds weird to say that's encouraging, but to me, it's proof that there is a God. Because if we can ever see love and kindness and warmth, I now go, no, that is God acting. He has given that to a particular person to be able to show that, or to experience that, because so you hear the question, people will say, oh, if God is so loving, or if he's so good, why is he allowing all this crap to happen?
Problem of evil. It's a philosophical, hotly debated philosophical topic. Throughout the centuries.
And I would say it's the opposite of, he is so loving that any human being on earth, what we opened up with, so even though it's hell right now, there is some really fun moments that I am having with my family. There's some moments where I can really breathe and relax. That is God's gift. That is him giving. And it's not just because I'm a believer. There's other people that are
experiencing those things too.
Atheists. And they, I'm thinking of one man in particular that I interact with on Twitter. And he loves his banjo and guitar, and he's an amazing player. And God has given him not only that talent, but his ability to enjoy that. So left to our own, as we now have to me, the privilege, it sounds weird and it's so ugly, but to witness human beings would devour their own, and right in our own country.
That's right. So, and it's like civilized society, civilized human coexistence is so fragile. It is so fragile. And
Yes.
we're living in a day in which we can see that you're just on the brink of like
Yeah.
war
Yeah.
breaking out in the streets. And it's
Yeah.
interesting. As I mentioned earlier, just some of the people that you and I have listened to, different podcasts and things. I appreciate these people, even they're coming
Me
from all
too.
different perspectives. And a lot of them, like I'm thinking of Joe Rogan right now. I listened to one
Yeah.
last night, and he believes in evolution. He's staunchly against any kind of religion, and for certain legitimate reasons, because he thinks of
Yeah.
like cultic thinking and control and manipulation. I
Yeah.
understand completely his critique. I don't know that he's ever even heard the gospel, and the
Yeah.
character of God portrayed accurately as you and I understand him. I don't even know, because he just seems to be real familiar with a lot of self-righteous religious stuff. At
Yeah.
any rate, believes in evolution. And in one sense, I'm always fascinated by that, because like, hey, if evolution's true, this is just the way it needs to play out. And
Right.
it's not
Right.
really meaningful. It doesn't really matter. People can be
Right.
savage and carnage can break out. It's just survival of the fittest, man. It's the
I
way it
was gonna
goes.
say, yeah. Yeah.
So whatever, it's just another day
Right.
in the office. Who cares, right?
Yeah.
Which
Yeah.
nobody believes that, though. Everyone sees, hey, this is a problem. But then, interestingly, along with that, the one I listened to last night, he was talking about, well, the good thing is at least we know that most people are good people. And yeah, you have
Right.
certain bad actors out there
Right.
in certain spheres, where it's small percentage of police officers, a small percentage of these people rioting. Um, but he said, I think he even repeated it, you have,
Yeah.
but most people are good and most people are
Right.
reasonable. And you and I would say, well, even good, reasonable people, like I understand what you're saying. In one sense, I can agree with that. But human nature being what it is, civility is very fragile, and
Right.
it can degrade into carnage very quickly,
Right.
very quickly.
Right.
And so
And
I think it's
that's,
healthy for us to be aware of that, and to be
yeah.
appropriately afraid of, not just afraid of other people out there, but like afraid of ourselves and what we're all capable of, just to
Yeah.
be truthful about our condition, which again, from your perspective and mine, would say, and thus our need for the gospel and who God
Right.
is, and our need for a
Right.
Messiah. The fact that the notion of a perfect man who lived in this world, who loved and served and gave, he saw everything clearly, saw everyone clearly, saw through everybody to the core of their hearts, and saw their motives, and still loved and served and
Yeah.
laid his life down. There is, yeah, we need such a God, such a Savior.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and back to what Joe Rogan was saying, I've even come to the point now where I could validate what he's saying. There are good people out there,
Sure.
but now my point is, but that is God. And
Right.
I'm thinking of the verse in Corinthians, where, I mean, he's saying it as a chastisement, but he's teaching us something. He said, why are you boasting about what has been given to you?
Yep.
So in other words, when people have a philanthropic desire to give, or they have charitable, they want to do well for another person, they don't even realize
Yep.
that is God
Yep.
acting on them.
That's
As
right.
James says, every good gift is from above. So
Absolutely.
there are good people, but God is the source.
Yep.
Um, uh, and to me, that's where then, one, we can be filled with gratitude that
Yep.
that is available on this earth and we're not left with our scary self. But it also shows his power, that he can intervene. He can intervene and break through, as you use that phrase a lot. He interrupts, I think is the word you and Don have used, of he interrupts our human nature and lets his nature shine through, and to where we have little visible aspects of what our God fully is and looks like,
Right.
his full range of character.
Right.
Where before,
Yeah.
I think I would hear a comment from that, like Joe Rogan, and go, no, they're not. People
Scoff.
are bad.
Scoff
Well,
at,
then
yeah.
you're discrediting what he has actually seen with his own eyes
Right.
and has experienced.
Right.
There are kind people out there.
Right.
Um, but I'm just now saying that's God.
Yeah.
God is
That's right.
doing that through
It's the
them.
manifestation of God through a
Yeah.
person, his intimate involvement in everything that
Yes.
happens in this world. And
Yes.
when we see carnage, we see humans left to themselves. And when we see goodness and productivity and helpfulness, which
Yeah.
all those different podcasters I mentioned, I find them very helpful. And
Yeah.
that is a manifestation of God in their lives. Even if you want to attribute to their giftedness, the mind they
Yes.
have,
Yeah.
the life
Yeah.
experience they've had to be able to see things the way they see them. I mean, all that, I believe God is over. He is
Yeah.
orchestrating and he is
Yeah.
author of. And so,
Well,
yeah,
and
I
just
absolutely see
humanly,
the same thing. God,
oops, sorry.
go ahead.
Yeah. Oh, you just cut out. So I started interrupting you because it blanked out. Are
Yeah,
we
go ahead.
okay now?
I believe same thing. God is
Yeah.
in and through all of these things. And
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, and it makes me then now I can just appreciate, like, I love Joe Rogan is one of my favorite podcasts, and the other one is Dave Rubin, and they
Yep.
would be considered on the left, but they're very charitable, they're kind, they're respectful. Joe Rogan especially, he says the truth like it does, but
Yep.
I can then just human to human, practically speaking, I'm learning from them. I'm even learning why they would put so much um, why they believe so much in evolution, even though I can see the end result, like you said, it still doesn't make sense, but I can appreciate their thoughtfulness and how they're forming their logical conclusions. But which then we all benefit from. We all benefit from good, healthy discourse. Um,
Right.
so anyway, yeah, I think that's
Yeah, well, that's good.
cool.
I think we covered the ground that I was wanting to cover.
Okay.
Do you have any other thoughts or any
I don't
other?
think so. I think this was really good. It was even just
No.
encouraging to me to have this conversation together and
Yeah.
to kind of again be hopeful because this has been a depressing time, frankly. Like last night
I
I
agree.
said to Doug, like what was the word I used? Like there's low morale everywhere. There's no aspect of life right now that's like, well, at least we've got that going. Like
Yeah,
everything is in the pits. And um, so it's just good. Thank you that we could
I
just
agree.
talk about
Yeah, no, thank you too.
truth.
And it's neat. I mean, I know we've talked about for a while, just the desire to record these types of conversations. I'm hoping
Yeah,
to connect with a couple other people soon to do other
yeah,
videos on the same thing, especially as we lead up to the election, just to put some encouragement out there
yeah,
to help us, at least to help us remember, what's true and to help us as we walk through.
yeah,
Because I agree. And I love the conversation. I think it's super valuable and I hope it's encouraging to other people too. And
yeah,
this is kind of, I don't know, my wiring and yours. And so we'll continue to have these discussions and involve some other people too. And hopefully it's encouraging to folks as a good distraction, a little healthy distraction, maybe a little breath
yeah,
of fresh air in
yeah.
otherwise challenging time. Because I agree with you. It's a dark time. It's a hard time.
It's not
So anything we
fun.
can do to encourage each other and spur each other on and
Yes.
share
Amen.
pass little cups of cold water back and forth for refreshment. It's good, right? To keep going.
That's
So
awesome. Yep.
good. All
And
right.
I
Well,
would
thanks,
just
Tracy.
say,
Yeah.
I just want to say too, if anybody listens to anything that we've said, or especially me, to like bring it up to you to if there's something that didn't come across
Yeah.
clear or because like you and I talked about, we are always in process. And it's one of the things I love about our friendship. We've been talking about all this stuff from the get-go, and it keeps evolving. And as we experience real life and then we are diving into scripture, it's kind of like, oh, we need to relook at that, or wait, what about this? And so I never want it to be like, this is the truth, this is all, I'm right. And um, we're just talking out from where we're processing right now. and
Right.
and
Yeah.
so I just want to
I
say that.
agree. Yeah. And there's people can put questions in the comment area or just
Oh
people
yeah.
email us, just come talk to us. But yeah,
Yeah.
happy to talk with you if you have questions about what we've talked about today. So, okay, Tracy,
Great.
thanks again for your
Thank
time.
you.